Her name was Lena Carter. She was born in a small town surrounded by mountains and silence. From the moment she could speak, Lena was told that the world outside their community was evil. She was told that only the people inside the group were pure and chosen by God. She was told that everyone else lived in sin and darkness. Lena believed every word because she had never seen anything different. Her world was one village, one leader, and one rule: obey without question. The leader of the group was called Father Jonah. He was an old man with a deep voice and calm eyes. He said he could speak directly to God, and everyone believed him. He made rules about how to dress, what to eat, how to pray, and even who people could marry. The people called him the Chosen One. No one dared to disagree with him. If someone asked a question, Father Jonah said it was the devil speaking through them. People were afraid to think differently. Lena's parents were loyal followers. They worked in the community fields all day and taught their children to fear the outside world. They told Lena that the city was full of liars, thieves, and demons. They said leaving the community meant losing their soul forever. Every Sunday, the group gathered in a large wooden hall. They sang songs and listened to Father Jonah preach for hours. He spoke about purity, sacrifice, and loyalty. He said that women must be silent and serve men with full obedience. He said that love for God meant surrendering everything, even your own will. Lena was 13 when she started feeling confused. She wanted to ask questions. She wanted to know why girls could not study or choose their future. But each time she tried to speak, her mother whispered, "Do not question God's plan." The community was surrounded by tall fences. There were guards at the gate. They said it was for protection, but it felt like a prison. The children were not allowed to meet outsiders. There was no internet, no TV, no phones. At night, Lena would look at the stars and wonder if other people could see the same sky. She imagined what the cities might look like: the lights, the cars, the noise. But she quickly pushed those thoughts away because they were considered sinful. When she turned 16, Father Jonah chose a husband for her. It was a man twice her age named Samuel. He was strict and quiet. He believed that a wife should never talk back. On the wedding night, Lena cried silently, realizing she had no control over her life. Her new home was small and cold. She cooked, cleaned, and served Samuel every day. He never said thank you. When she made mistakes, he called her ungrateful and weak in faith. Sometimes he hit her if she spoke too much. Months turned into years. Lena's spirit slowly broke. She smiled less, spoke less, and started to believe that maybe she really was worthless. The only thing that gave her peace was the small moments alone, when she looked at the horizon and dreamed of freedom. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. A young woman named Grace arrived in the community. She said she was joining the group to serve God. But unlike others, Grace asked questions. She looked confident and fearless. Lena was drawn to her immediately. They started talking in secret. Grace told Lena that she had come from the outside world, that life there was not full of demons, but of choices. She described schools, books, music, and freedom. At first, Lena didn't believe her. She thought Grace was testing her faith. But Grace showed her a small book hidden under her clothes. A book from the outside. It was about women who fought for their rights and found courage to change their lives. Lena read the book in secret every night. Each word felt like light breaking through darkness. For the first time, she realized she was not weak. She was trapped. And being trapped was not the same as being sinful. One night, she looked into the mirror and whispered, "I want to be free." It was the first time she ever said it out loud. The next morning, Father Jonah announced that Grace had been expelled from the community. He said she was spreading lies and tempting people away from God's path. No one saw Grace again. Lena was terrified. She wanted to ask where Grace had gone, but she stayed silent. That night, she found a small note under her door. It was written in Grace's handwriting. "The world is waiting for you. When you're ready, follow the river." Lena's heart raced. She didn't know exactly what it meant, but she hid the note inside her pillow. For days, she could not stop thinking about it. Weeks passed. Father Jonah grew stricter. He told everyone that the world was ending soon and that only his followers would be saved. People worked longer hours and ate less food. Fear controlled everything. Lena began to feel trapped inside her own mind. The dreams of freedom grew stronger. Sometimes she thought she could hear Grace's voice telling her to run. Then, one night, a heavy storm hit the village. Thunder rolled over the mountains and the guards ran for shelter. Lena saw her chance. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, took a small piece of bread, and slipped out of her house. She followed the path behind the fields, the one that led to the river. Rain soaked her clothes and her hands were shaking. When she reached the riverbank, she looked back one last time. The lights of the community were fading behind her. She whispered, "Forgive me," and stepped into the water. The water was cold and wild. Lena could feel the current pulling her forward, but she kept walking. Her heart was beating fast. Every sound of the storm felt like a warning. She thought of Father Jonah, of Samuel, of all the faces that would soon notice she was gone. But it was too late to turn back now. She crossed the river and reached the forest on the other side. The trees were tall and dark, and rain dripped from every branch. Her dress was heavy with water, but she kept moving. She remembered Grace's words, "Follow the river." So she walked along its edge, following it downstream. All night she walked, stumbling over rocks and roots. When morning came, the rain stopped. The sun rose weakly through the mist. Lena was exhausted and hungry. Her feet hurt, and her clothes were torn. But she felt something she had never felt before: freedom. She sat by the river and cried, not from fear, but from the strange feeling of being alive on her own terms. There was no one watching her, no one telling her what to do. For the first time, her thoughts were truly her own. After resting, she started walking again. She didn't know where the river would lead her. She had no map, no money, no idea what the outside world was really like. But she believed that if Grace had survived out there, maybe she could too. As the day passed, Lena reached a small dirt road. She followed it until she saw a farmhouse in the distance. Her heart pounded. It was the first house she had ever seen outside the community fence. She hesitated, then knocked on the door. An older woman opened it. She had kind eyes and a scarf around her head. She could barely speak. She said only, "Please, I need help." The woman let her in without asking many questions. She gave her warm soup, dry clothes, and a place to rest. Her name was Margaret, and she lived alone. She told Lena she didn't have to tell where she came from if she didn't want to. Lena was too scared to tell the truth anyway. For the next few days, Lena stayed with Margaret. She helped her with chores around the farm and tried to learn about the outside world. Margaret had a small radio. For the first time, Lena heard music, real music, with instruments and voices full of joy. It made her cry again. She didn't know that life could sound like that. Margaret noticed her curiosity and gave her some old books. They were about geography, science, and history, things Lena had never been allowed to learn. She read late into the night, hungry for knowledge. Every page opened a new world she never knew existed. But deep down, she was still afraid. She worried that someone from the cult might come looking for her. Father Jonah had always said that anyone who left would be hunted and punished. Sometimes at night, she woke up from nightmares of being dragged back. One morning, Margaret found her sitting by the window, shaking. Lena whispered, "They will come for me." Margaret took her hand and said, "No, my dear, you are safe now. They have no power here." Those words stayed with her. They have no power here. She repeated them in her mind until they started to feel true. After 2 weeks, Lena decided she could not hide forever. She wanted to build a new life, to earn her own living. Margaret helped her find a job in a nearby town at a small bakery. Lena used a false last name so no one could trace her. She began waking up early, baking bread and serving customers with a shy smile. The people in town were kind, though curious. They asked her where she was from, but she always said, "A small village far away." She tried to blend in, to learn how normal people lived. She learned how to use money, how to read signs, how to cross the street. Simple things that others took for granted felt like miracles to her. One day, a customer left an old smartphone on the bakery counter. Lena had seen phones before, but only in the pictures from Grace's book. She asked her coworker what it was like to use one. The girl laughed and said, "You just touch the screen, and the world opens up." That evening, Lena borrowed a small phone from Margaret and connected it to the internet. Her hands trembled as she typed for the first time. She searched for women who escaped cults. Dozens of stories appeared. Some women had written books, others had built charities to help people like her. Lena felt less alone. She realized that there were others who had walked the same dark road. She decided to write her own story, not for fame, but for healing. She wanted to speak after years of being silent. She started with a single line. "I was born in a world that told me to stay quiet, but I learned to speak." Every night after work, she wrote more. She described her childhood, her fear, her escape. The words poured out like tears, washing away the pain she had carried for so long. One afternoon, a local reporter came to the bakery. He overheard Lena talking to a customer about her writing. He asked if he could read her story. At first, she refused, afraid to be exposed, but later she thought of Grace, brave, fearless Grace, and said yes. A week later, the reporter published an article about her under the headline, "The Woman Who Escaped the Mountain Cult." The story spread quickly. People from other towns sent letters and emails saying her courage inspired them. Some were survivors of other closed communities. They thanked her for speaking out. For the first time, Lena felt that her pain had meaning. But not everyone was kind. A few angry messages appeared too. People who still followed Father Jonah. They called her a liar, a traitor, a sinner. It frightened her, but she refused to hide again. She told herself, "They controlled my voice once. Never again." Margaret stood by her side through it all. When fear returned, she reminded Lena, "You are free now, and freedom is stronger than fear." As months passed, Lena's story reached a charity that helped cult survivors. They invited her to speak at an event in the city. She was nervous, but she went. She stood on stage, looked at the crowd, and told them everything. When she finished, people stood and clapped. She cried, but this time her tears were of pride. That night, she walked outside into the bright lights of the city. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of the world beyond the fence. She realized that the river had not only carried her away from the cult, it had carried her toward herself. The city felt big and alive. Every sound, every light, and every person seemed full of energy. For Lena, it was both beautiful and strange. She had spent her whole life behind fences, but now she stood in a place where the sky had no limits. After the speech at the Survivor event, people came to her with hugs and kind words. They told her that her story gave them hope. Some cried and said, "You told my story too." Lena realized she had become a voice for those who were still silent. The charity offered her a small job. She started helping other survivors who had escaped from cults and abusive groups. She listened to their stories, guided them towards shelters, and helped them learn basic life skills. Every time she comforted someone, she saw her younger self in their eyes. Lena began to study in the evenings. She joined an adult education program. At first, she struggled. She had never attended a normal school. She had to learn math, grammar, and computer skills from the start. But she never gave up. She studied late at night, sometimes falling asleep with books open beside her. Margaret often called to check on her. She was proud and said, "You are building something new, one step at a time." Lena smiled and said, "You gave me my first chance." After 2 years, Lena finished her studies and received a diploma. It was the first certificate she had ever held. When she looked at it, she whispered, "This is proof that I am free." One evening, she was invited to speak at a local university. She stood before hundreds of students and said, "I used to live in a world where thinking was forbidden. Now I teach others to think for themselves." Her words touched everyone. Students came to her afterward to ask questions about how cults control people and how victims can recover. Lena told them that healing takes time, but it begins with truth. She started working with a psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery. Together, they created a small program to help women rebuild their confidence after leaving abusive environments. They called it Voices of Freedom. The program grew quickly. Within a year, they were helping dozens of women find housing, jobs, and education. Lena trained as a counselor so she could guide them more deeply. Her own pain had turned into strength. Sometimes, she still thought about the mountain community. She wondered what happened to Father Jonah, to Samuel, to the others. But she no longer felt anger or fear. She had forgiven them in her heart, not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. One day, a letter arrived. It was from a woman who had recently escaped from the same cult. The letter said, "I found your article online. Your story gave me courage. Because of you, I ran away. Thank you for saving my life." Lena sat with the letter in her hands for a long time. Tears filled her eyes. She thought of Grace, the woman who had once given her a small book and a small hope. Grace had planted the first seed of freedom in her heart. Now, Lena was doing the same for others. Years passed. Lena's organization became known across the country. She spoke at conferences, worked with human rights groups, and appeared in documentaries. But no matter how many people she met, she never forgot where she came from. Sometimes she visited the river, the same river she had crossed that night of the storm. It was peaceful now, with soft water and sunlight dancing on the surface. She stood on the bank and whispered, "You carried me to life." One afternoon, while giving a talk at a school, a young girl asked her, "Do you ever wish your past was different?" Lena smiled and said, "No, because every painful step led me here. My past built my courage." After the event, she walked through the park. Children were playing, music was in the air, and the world felt open. She sat on a bench and closed her eyes, feeling a deep calm inside. For the first time, she didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like a woman who had truly lived. Her life was no longer defined by fear or pain, but by strength and hope. Before going home, she took out her notebook and wrote the final line of her story. "Freedom is not the absence of walls. It is the power to walk beyond them." She smiled, knowing her journey had come full circle. She had once been a girl trapped behind fences. Now she was a woman helping others find the open sky. And somewhere in that wide, bright world, Grace would have been proud.